Your pelvic floor isn't just about avoiding leaks. It's the foundation of your strength, your stability, and yes, your pleasure. In this week's Reproductive Rebel episode, I am joined by fitness expert Alicia Jones to explore what every woman should know about their pelvic floor and core, no matter what their age or stage of life. We're busting myths about Kegels, uncovering the real connection between your core and your hormones, and giving you simple, practical tools that you can start using today to feel stronger, more supported, and more at home in your body. Because your pelvic floor isn't just a set of muscles, it's the root of your power. Listen to Pelvic Floor and Core Essentials, now out on the Reproductive Rebel podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are. I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am overjoyed to be joined once again by the amazing Alicia Jones. Welcome back to the show, Alicia.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. We get along so well when we're on the show together. So thank you for having me.
We really do. It's so fun doing this show because I meet some of the coolest people, and you are one of those people where I was like, man, I wish you were a girlfriend that like lived up the street that I could just hang out with on a regular basis.
No, I feel that way too. Although we are technically cyber coffee or water session now, right? There you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have talked about so many cool things, and I refer to your episode all the time about exercise with hormone shifts. And one of the things that we talked about in our initial call when we got to know each other was about pelvic floor and core. And I think this is a really important topic for a lot of people because I think a lot don't even know what their pelvic floor is and what it does and how darn important it is. And the only time that it ever really comes top of mind is when you're giggling or sneezing and you leak. I think that's usually the only time people think about, oh, something's going on down there. Mm-hmm. So for those of you that have not listened to previous episodes with this amazing professional, please go back over the course of last season, season 3, and this season 4, and check out the episodes that I have done with Alicia, a wealth of information around women's fitness with a focus in those late perimenopausal and postmenopausal years because she's a fitness and wellness expert for women over 50. But let's share with the audience, those who haven't met us up until now, a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes. So I think you summed it up really well. I'm a fitness and wellness weight loss expert for women I'm starting to see more 40s and 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond. But basically, like my signature program is over 50 fit and fabulous. So 50s. It's women that are in the perimenopause journey all the way to postmenopause. And that's why now that the conversation has started, I'm starting to see a lot more people coming that are in their late 30s, 40s, late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond, because there's also the post-menopause journey. And you were talking about specifically when it came to pelvic floor, that people don't even realize what the pelvic floor is. The thing is that they only realize the bad things about the pelvic floor, like you were talking about. And they think it is normal as women. So what I like to do is debunk a lot of what we believe to be normal or normalized as a part of being women when it comes to the health and fitness and exercise area. So it is not normal to sneeze and pee and leak, and or to cough and leak, or to jump and leak. That means your pelvic floor is weak or it's tight. And because it's tight, it's weak. So that's what we'll be talking about today. I don't know if you meant you wanted me to go into an intro about who I am, but I think I summed that up there.
Yes, I think you touched all of the pieces that I was hoping for there. And I love the fact that you talked about the too tight part, because when we look at leaking, most people go, oh, I need to do Kegels. No, there are a lot of people, and I've talked about this with pelvic PTs that I've had on the show before about like Kegels and what they do, but there's this like narrative in our culture that if you leak, something's loose, you have to tighten it. But that's not always the case. And actually, in my clients, and I don't know if you see this, but in my clients, I actually find that it's too tight that is far more common.
Yes, yes. And I think that some of that is, where are you holding your stress? You might not even realize that you're holding your stress in your pelvic floor, even in your anal region. And we're going to be getting really deep into topics like the anus and your vagina and pelvic floor, because it isn't just the front, it is also the anus, the anal area that tends to get really tight. And so we start to see women having issues with hemorrhoids or having issues going to the bathroom, fissures, anal fissures. So it's all kind of connected. You need to have elasticity. You need to be loose, let's say more mobile in your entire body, including your pelvic floor, everything down below region. And you need to be strong as well. So you need to have great, it's not that Kegels are never important in strengthening, but that is the go-to thing. And what I find more often than not is women overdo Kegels, overdo sucking in their stomach, especially after years of, trying to fit into the Spanx or the leotards, whatever it might be, and sucking in to look a specific way or even to get into the jeans. And all of that is doing more of the tightening and the damage to the pelvic floor instead of helping your pelvic floor retain liquids and be strong and supple.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that you mentioned all of that, because we cram ourselves into all kinds of things. And I also think about like my postpartum journey, the first time versus the second time, right? And the first time I wore a waist trainer because I thought I had to help my muscles. Somebody told me, right? That's how we learn a lot of this stuff. Somebody told me that this was going to help. And so I did the thing, right? And so this is the whole reason this program exists, is to debunk some of these myths of somebody told me. And this time, as a early 40s woman, I did not squish myself into the waist trainer. And honestly, I regained my ability to control my urine much faster than I did trying to stuff myself into the thing that I thought was going to help my torso come back into position.
Oh, totally. Yes.
It makes a huge difference.
And you did pelvic floor work, didn't you, as well?
I did. Yes. I worked with a pelvic PT after I gave birth. It was probably one of the greatest gifts I gave myself, and was so fortunate to have Dr. Emily Wilson. She has been on this show. So if you want to check out my interview with her and my reflections on pelvic PT, you can see all of that in episode 1. But she worked with me in my postpartum care. She's the owner of Pelvic Wisdom, and she's brilliant at what she does. She works on the energetics of the pelvis as well as the physiological presentation of the pelvis, and helped unwind the birth trauma that was there too. So a lot of times when women give birth, there's a story, and I'm just going to call it that, good, bad, or whatever. Like there's a story that's held in the pelvis. When we have trauma around our identity or our fertility, or we have financial challenges that hit our scarcity and safety buttons, anything like that is all reflected in our pelvis, and we guard, right? So it's really common in our culture for women's pelvic floors to be incredibly tight. And it makes intimacy painful. It makes it hard to weight lift. Like working with her, starting to try to do more than just weight bearing activity after. And I can say at the time of this recording, I'm not as fully back into weightlifting as I would like to be, but I'm still also like 10 months postpartum. And she taught me so much about breathing around like getting my body and that pelvic pump aspect of things like primed before doing the lift. And after having my second small human, that made a huge difference in terms of being able to lift and not have any leaking, being able to lift and feeling steady in everything going on down there. So, you know, flexibility in the muscles in your pelvis and in your hips is really important for longevity, but it's also really important in terms of when you're exercising and being able to do exercises safely.
And you did something fabulous. You went and got PT for your pelvic floor. And whether you are postpartum or for some people, they've never had kids or you want to have kids one day, whatever your journey is, all women should at some point in time see a PT for pelvic floor because we do carry a lot and it does tend to go, like there's muscles down there. It tends to go down there. We hold tension in different places. Some of us hold it in our neck and shoulders. Some of us hold it in our pelvic floor. Some of us hold it in both places. So I think for all women, we have a little bit more maintenance and work for our parts. And so we do need to see a pelvic floor specialist at some point.
Yeah, I think it's imperative. I mean, think about the number of hollow organs we have in there. Our uterus is a hollow organ. Our bladder is a hollow organ. Like, and you have fascial structures that act like webbing that hold all of those structures up and in place. And without going into a big, long Chinese medicine explanation, if you don't have certain energies strong in your system, some of those things can sink. And this is where a pelvic PT can actually help with making sure that things are moving freely. They can help with potential signs of prolapse, which can happen whether you've had babies or not. Common misconception that you have to have babies to open the door for prolapse. So
like we talked about, some women that haven't even had children, they go through menopause and into post-menopause. So estrogen, it helps with elasticity, helps with muscular strength, right? So when we lose that estrogen, we also lose elasticity, and gravity is just pushing down on the pelvic floor region. And so you can easily have prolapse or pelvic floor issues without ever even having had a child because your estrogen drops. As women, that's something that is just a part of what happens to us.
Gravity is not our friend, in summary. So what Alicia does helps us to defy gravity.
We work against it. There you go. Oh my gosh.
Well, and we learn how to safely move resistance against this downward force that is working against us, right? And so let's talk a little bit about what encompasses the pelvic floor, because I think some people just structurally don't know completely what we're talking about. And then how that ties in with the core and why this is so important for day-to-day activities, for stability, for balance, because as we get older, trips and falls and all of these kinds of things start to become a big concern.
Yes. Yeah. I have never identified the pelvic floor only as the pelvic floor muscles, even though it is. And we're talking about the muscles that are from our pelvis down. You were talking about uterus. We're talking about, that's not a muscle, it's an organ, but all of the structure inside, all of the muscles that are holding everything up inside of us as women in that cavity that's hollow. But I've never really identified it as the only structure because it is so combined or united with our core, our whole entire core, from our diaphragm, all of our transverse abdominis muscles, all of those internal muscles that can potentially act like a corset to pull everything in a natural way, not in a sucking in your stomach sort of way. You were talking about breath. So let's go back to the diaphragm first as a part of this structure. When you take an inhale, your diaphragm comes down, it drops, and it puts this intra-abdominal pressure into your abdomen, your stomach area. And what that does is it gently pushes down onto your pelvic floor region. And that pelvic floor region are those little muscles in your pelvic region that are holding up all of the organs, the structures within the muscular system, I'd say, for example. And so breathing is such an integral part of creating a strong pelvic floor, because if you do not have these deep breaths, a lot of times we end up, especially we were talking about stress, having shallow breathing. So we're not having this deep diaphragmatic breathing that's creating that abdominal pressure that's then creating strength in our pelvic floor by pressing down on the pelvic floor. And then with those pelvic floor muscles, they also need to have that elasticity to rise up again and create strength and stability for all of the organs that are down below. So it really is a structure that is all united together. And it's not just one area that I like to talk about, because we need to master it all. The diaphragm, your abdomen, transverse abdominis, internal ab muscles, your rectus abdominis are the external that actually don't really help so much with the pelvic floor. It's those internal ab muscles that do. And then working on the actual muscles within the pelvis and pelvic region. Even your anal muscles are really important as well. And it's a combination of all of that together and how they work combined together.
So all of these muscles that she's talking about, think about all of your day-to-day activities, right? Going to the bathroom, number 1 and number 2, getting up and down out of chairs. Okay. Like something as basic as getting up and down off of the throne that you just did number 1 and number 2, right? Being able to, and I make jokes, but it's true, like these very taken for granted day-to-day activities, like getting up and down out of a chair, requires these muscles to be able to function and fire properly. So we talked about them. How do you do work on these deep muscles? Because I know that's going to be the next logical question is, okay, cool. I know what they are, and I know that I leak a little. How can I work on optimizing the function? Because I am afraid of falls in the future. I am concerned about getting up and down off the floor because I have a little person to play with.
Yes. And with the pelvic floor, it's more about getting up off of the floor without experiencing prolapse or without starting to have issues where we're starting to feel protrusion, like things might be falling out. Or then that first sign is that you are sneeze and then you leak a little bit. You are running and you leak a little bit. Impact of any kind or lifting of any kind and you leak a little bit. Something is weak in those pelvic floor muscles. So for example, when it comes to going to the bathroom, we all kind of associate going to the bathroom with do what you need to do, finish what you need to do and get out, right? But we need to become a lot more aligned with those muscles that we're working. So something that is easy for you to do, it's not always the most fun, but it's easy to do, is go to the bathroom. And when you're going number 1, when you're peeing, try and hold your urine and then push it out again. And then hold the urine and push it out. That's almost like the Kegel we talked about, which we did talk about it not always being beneficial, but those are the same muscles. So you can start to understand those muscles and what they feel like. And I'm not saying to do that with a number 2, but when you are going number 2, I think a lot of people don't realize the strain they're also putting or the lack of strain. They just do what they need to do. So the next time you're doing a number 2, ask yourself, is there a lot of force or am I barely actually pushing? Because a lot of times we become disconnected with those muscles as well. And so you don't realize you're overstraining or you're underusing those muscles. So those are the first 2 little things that you can do that have nothing to do with actual exercise. The other thing is what you were talking about, which again, it is a type of exercise. It's breathing. Because remember, the diaphragm is what then puts pressure on the abdominal cavity, which then comes all the way down, puts pressure on your pelvic floor muscles. And so you're strengthening those pelvic floor muscles and you're also creating, it's almost like a U-scoop. So they come down and then they push back and tighten up. So you want to create almost this dome of push down, inhale, the pressure comes down, you're strengthening those muscles, and then you relax and they're able to create elasticity to come back up again, to basically come back into place. And so I'm not sure the type of breathing you did. There are two types of breathing. One is the diaphragmatic breath, which we all know as deep inhale, belly rise, and exhale, belly fall. But there is another type of breathing, and it's called the working breath. Which breathing did you do when you were working on your breathing?
More the diaphragmatic breath. That was actually something that really surprised me. And I think that a lot of people don't realize is we have this bounce back culture, right? I know I keep equating it to postpartum, but that's because it's my immediate reference point, where we have to get back in the gym and we have to be able to exercise. And like, I literally laid on the floor for weeks, just breathing and inhaling low and deep in my pelvis so that I could feel my breath connect with those muscles down there, and then exhale really slowly. And I had my feet up on the wall, so it made like a 90-degree, and so that I could feel it better. Because after pushing it and the force of pushing my son out, just laying on the floor, I couldn't make a connection in my brain to these muscles. Like I couldn't feel them for a while. I mean, granted, you get a lot of swelling and whatever, and you can start the breathing immediately after you give birth, right? It's gentle enough to do that. But I had to lay and put my feet against the wall, and then my knees made like a 90-degree angle to my hips and breathe that way in order to be able to actually feel and have a sensory experience with those muscles. So I did that for quite a number of weeks before I ever did any of the bridges or any of the other exercises that I was instructed to do afterwards. And any of you who follow me on social media, on my Instagram, Moon Essence Me, you'll see pictures of me laying on the floor with my son, and I'm doing like the clam, where I'm bringing my knee up and I'm bringing it back down again, because I was working on all of those muscles and trying to get them to start firing and work properly again. But there's so much power in that breath.
And I think it's the bounce back culture, but it's also the fact that it's like, I feel guilty that I'm not doing more. Like I just need to be doing more. So I think starting with the breath and having the patience to work that through, you're building yourself up even stronger from the foundation.
Yes, so, I agree.
Yeah.
The book Bitter or Better, I Decide by Hannah Koch is a practical and uplifting guide to turning life challenges into stepping stones. Bitter or Better shows how to understand yourself, resolve conflict, strengthen relationships, and reconnect with the source of love so you can choose better, not bitter, every day. For more information, go to bitterorbetteridecide.com.
And you did that on the floor lying down. If you're at the next level, for some that feel like I'm not in postpartum right now, for some of your audience, maybe they're actually pregnant right now, or they've had their kids for a while. You can also get a yoga ball and do it seated on a yoga ball. Have your legs wider apart and roll around for a little bit, just feeling those pelvic floor muscles, all of those little muscles on the bottom of the pelvis there, and try doing your breath on the ball, really doing what you were doing, focusing in on the pelvic floor muscles as you're taking in those deep inhales. And again, because you're seated, gravity is not your friend. So it's pushing down on you, and you can get that, even that greater sensation of what exactly is working and where you are. And on that note, you did diaphragmatic breath, deep inhales and exhales. The other breath that I was going to mention is called the working breath. And that is where you focus in on expanding your ribs like an accordion, and then exhale, compressing your ribs almost like you want them to meet together like an accordion. So if you can think of an accordion, for anybody that's listening to this, my hands are together right now, and then they widen out like a big, huge C accordion. That is our ribs. And then they come back in as you press the accordion in back into that starting position. So if you place your palms on your ribs and your longest finger is right on the sternum, if you're doing an accordion breath, which is that working breath, when you take a deep inhale and you expand those ribs, your two middle fingers will no longer touch. If they're still touching at the end of that motion, you're not expansive. You're not expanding out the ribs. And so you really want to work on, you're doing
I'm totally doing it while you're doing this. Yes, of course I am, because that's who I am. I am doing this along with Alicia's explanation right now.
Is it working? Are your fingertips like moving away? I can't see that.
Yes, they are.
Perfect. Okay, so now that you've done the expansion and your fingers are no longer touching, for the exhale, you want to blow out, you purse your lips and blow out like you're breathing into a balloon. So lots of force, like you're breathing into a balloon. And when you do that, you will start to feel not only are your ribs coming back into that center accordion position, fingers touch again, but there's a lot of intra-abdominal pressure.
Yes.
Yes. So we talked about how that pressure is also really important to create more abdominal pressure, which then creates more of that tension for strength in the pelvic floor. So this is the working breath, deep, expansive breath like an accordion. I call it the accordion breath in the ribs. Exhale like you're breathing into a balloon. Mm-hmm. Feel that tension all the way through your abdominal cavity, all the way into your core. This is also a really great core ab exercise. And you can do that on the ball or against the wall and feel that connection to the pelvic floor muscles and what is happening. And if you're just starting, for example, you might not have that strength yet to do that. Like you were talking about at first, it was really hard for you to do.
Very.
Yes. And for you, I think when you first had a baby, you're not going to be doing this working breath. You'd start with the deep inhales and exhales, the abdominal breaths, right? But as you get stronger, you might want to try adding in this working breath if you've been cleared to do a little bit more. And with this working breath, if you're not sure what you're supposed to be feeling with this pursed lips, tight tension in your core, actually get a balloon. Go to the dollar store, whatever it is, the penny saver, whatever. Go get a balloon, and as you inhale, take a deep inhale through your nose, and as you exhale, breathe into that balloon, and you will immediately understand what that pressure in your core is supposed to feel like.
That's really cool. As I'm doing this while she's giving these instructions, I'm noticing essentially where I still have weaknesses. Again, 10 months postpartum, my body's still coming back. I know it's a little off topic, but it takes a lot of time. You are somewhat close to, I'm not even going to say normal, somewhat back to a baseline around 1 year postpartum, and it can take 2 full years, 24 months before your hormones are totally normal. So anybody who's listening, because there are a progressively larger number of mothers who are becoming mothers or mothers again in their 40s, which is in this age bracket that Alicia specializes in. So she's seeing all of these things in her work. And when she's working with women who are more in their 50s, they may have small people at home still because they became mothers later. There's a lot of us that did like the career focused thing, then decided to become moms or waited until we had the right partner and then we became moms or whatever the story is, right? So we're dealing with these estrogen and progesterone shifts in our body that deal with particularly the estrogen and the elasticity of things. This is changing while we are in some level of recovering from having small people if you've chosen to become a mom later in life. But also just this, like, we haven't really been aware of these muscles before collectively. Some people are very plugged into this, but collectively, I know that no trainer that I ever worked with when I was doing kickboxing as a younger woman talked to me about diaphragmatic and working breaths man, that working breath thing would have been super helpful when I was kicking things for a living. Like, I mean, come on now. So like, we're just generally not taught about how these very deep-seated muscles work in our body and really how important they are. People who've had experience singing, which I have that in my background, the balloon thing totally makes sense to me because being able to project to the back of the room, you can't do that with your throat. Your vocal cords will burn out after a while. If you are projecting, you need to use those muscles that she's talking about in order to get your voice to project. So I'm not unfamiliar with, I just had never heard it called a working breath before, but I'm very familiar with what that engagement feels like because I used to sing a lot. My undergraduate was in music. I sang in a traveling a cappella group, like a whole thing. Yeah, see, little fun.
I wonder if, I don't know anything about singing and pelvic floor, but I wonder if they've done any research that singers have better pelvic floor strength. Because
that would be cool to know.
Yes, it really would. I think it would now I'm going to be a geek leader and I'm going to have to geek out if I can find anything on that because it really does take a lot of your diaphragm and your core in order for you to sing, to belt your notes out, right? So I can imagine that helped you to some degree with pelvic floor later on.
Well, and then listening to your explanation of the working breath, as somebody who did a lot of singing, I realize actually where I have work to do because I know what it used to feel like. So as you were doing your explanation and I was following along with you, I'm like, oh, I have a little more work to do in this area. No wonder my singing in the car has been a lot softer than it usually is, right? Because it is like that same blowing of a balloon, you have that kind of engagement in your core when you're relaxing your vocal cords and you're projecting to the back of the room. Because when you belt, you tighten your vocal cords and you try to fling that sound to the back of the room, but you can only do it for a period of time before you end up with nodules on your vocal cords, burnt out. If you're doing show after show, night after night kind of thing, you completely lose your voice because you're not using it efficiently. But when you know how to engage those muscles, it makes much more efficient ability to continue to perform night after night. So that makes a lot of sense to me in terms
now I wish I sang. I'm just like, you never want to hear me sing. But, I just try and be quiet as much as possible because it's not fun. So I really wish that I had that talent. That's great.
Well, it goes to show, though, that like these little ways, like I never put those two things together until you were walking us through that exercise. But like there are a lot of day-to-day things. And I live in this arena for Pete's sake. And I work with pelvic floors all day long. And I never put that breathing connection together. So there are a lot of aspects of our life, just living our day-to-day life that we really take for granted in terms of the functionality of this part of our body. I mean, swelling in your feet and ankles, if your pelvic floor are too tight, you're not getting the efficient sump pump action. So when Alicia was talking about breathing deep and having that you make a connection with these muscles to push them down, that's where you get that sump pump action, which helps to bring fluid up out of your lower extremities. And also why when you have a little person taking up a lot of real estate in your abdomen, it is not uncommon for there to be, it's one of the reasons anyway, not uncommon for there to be extra fluid in your legs, for example, because there's a lot of push on your pelvic floor and it's hard to get it to come back up again. I loved what you said about the yoga ball. I did this when I was preparing for labor, actually. I would breathe in and I would roll around on the ball to try to like essentially remember what all those muscles felt like because, he had been putting a lot of pressure on that part of my body for a long period of time. But it's important to feel and connect with these places and spaces because now let's translate that to weight training. Okay. And being able to do safe lifts because I know as women, when, we start getting into this phase of our life and everybody's like, you need to eat a lot of protein and you need to lift heavy, right? And so some women are like, I want bone health. I'm going to lift heavy. And they just kind of throw themselves into it. And then they go, oh, my back, My
my
right?
pelvic floor. And now I had someone reach out to me too recently because they were like, since I've started lifting, I've gotten more hemorrhoids and anal fissures.
Yes.
And is this something that's common? And I'm like, pelvic floor dysfunction. Something is going on there first. And which is why I think it is like we are literally strongly built houses as long as we create that structure with strength. And so starting with the breath first, the diaphragmatic breathing, let's say you work your way up to the working breath. That working breath then has one more element, and I call it the Pillsbury Doughboy technique, but some people are like, oh, do I have to push my stomach out to do that? So I'm just going to call it by its actual name, abdominal bracing. But I'm going to explain where this came from. Have you seen the Pillsbury Doughboy commercials with the little guy? He's so cute, right? And someone always comes at the end and violates him by poking him hard. And he goes, right?
Yeah.
So someone pokes him in the stomach, and then he kind of braces himself. So you see for a momentary second that he contracts in as he's laughing and touching his stomach. And that's why I call this the Pillsbury Doughboy technique, because what we need to do when we start doing that exhale on that working breath, so breathing into a balloon, pursing the lips and trying to bring our accordion ribs back into center, we need to do what is known as abdominal bracing. So someone's coming to poke us in the stomach. We are not going to be like the Pillsbury Doughboy that allows that finger to go in, right? We are going to brace ourselves. When someone comes to poke you, or let's say you've done a self-defense class to punch you in the stomach, what's the first thing you do? You brace. That's it. That is actually what we're supposed to be doing when we do core work, when we do any sort of lifting heavy objects. We're supposed to take our deep inhale. As you exhale, you purse your lips, you create that intra-abdominal strength, and you do a brace. And that brace is not sucking in the stomach. It is pretending someone's about to come and poke you. And as they poke you, you will not let that finger go in. You don't like that feeling. Or someone's about to punch you in self-defense class, and you are not going to let them just wind you, right? You are going to create that shield in your stomach. So even if the breath is off at first with lifting, what you need to do is have that abdominal bracing. That's going to create that strength in that cavity and in our pelvic floor to be able to take on the load. Because if you're not breathing properly, if you don't have the strength in your core, a lot of times the pelvic floor is taking the brunt of the load. Yeah. And if it is taking the brunt of the load on something that it's not strong enough to do, it's going to break. And that's what we were talking about. I think about it a lot with squats, because people end up heavy loading with squats or doing leg press machines or doing something where they're bending down. This is stretching out your pelvic floor muscles when you come down, by the way, at the same time as you have to contract and strengthen when you come up, right? If you do not have this bracing technique down pat, you are putting a heavy load onto an area that may already be very weak. So we need everything to work together. You want your pelvic floor to get stronger, so we need to do squats, but we need the breath, we need the bracing to be a part of that equation. And it might take you a while to first get the breath and then add on the bracing. And then from there, that's when you start to work on adding in exercises and incorporating exercises like the squat. And in the meantime, you're getting PT that's helping to loosen up, to create mobility for those muscles, as well as the strength. Because remember, any muscle that's too tight can't expand and contract, which means there isn't any force, so you're not getting that help. It's just going to hurt and something's going to happen.
I love that. And I think that's something that we also don't talk nearly enough about, is how important flexibility is. It makes me think about that Netflix series that they talked about, Blue Zones, and people who lived over 100, and they look at several areas of the world where there are blue zones, the highest concentration of centurions. And one of the common things for every single one of those was flexibility of the hips. There, one of the episodes, there was a man who was like in a full squatted, like frog looking position, and he was working on something on the ground in front of him like it was nothing. He was like 102, but he was down in that squatted position. Just would stay there while he was working on what he was working on the floor in front of him. And there was a lot of talk in that particular episode around flexibility. But to your point, the muscles need that kind of flexibility. And I just think about like your lunky bodybuilders, male or female, doesn't matter. Any body who bulks up like that, a lot of them can't even scratch their nose or their back because they're so tight.
Yes.
Flexibility and strength make for optimal functionality. And it doesn't matter what body parts you walk around with. So, even for men, this kind of breathing, this kind of engagement in those muscles is important for their heavy lifting too, because we all have a pelvic floor. This is what I tell people about pelvic steaming. Like, we all have a pelvic floor.
Yes.
We all need it in order to function properly. Now, we have a few more ways that pelvic dysfunction can show up than an assigned at birth male counterpart. But I mean, we still have hollow spaces. And this is how hernias happen for men when they overlift and down into the cavity, their intestines come. And there's a whole bunch of ways that if you're not pliable and these muscles aren't cared for and strong, and it really does come back to breath. It's so amazing to me how something so gentle can be such a foundational and critical part of being strong in every other aspect of your working physical body.
Yes, absolutely. And to that point too, we were talking about how, because it's such a natural, normalized part, breathing. I mean, you don't do it, you're dead. That's it. You need to breathe. And so we don't even think twice about it. It's like that picture you put up on the wall that you really love at first, but then soon, like, you pass it all the time and someone mentions, oh, I love that picture. You're like, what? You've completely forgotten about it because it's blended in so naturally to your daily life. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. Like, I had this beautiful picture and we had an Easter egg hunt. Yes, I'm older. And yes, we still do Easter egg hunts. Okay.
Yes, I love it.
And one of the clues was hidden behind this picture. And it was like the beautiful picture of the elephant. And I was like, we don't have a picture of an elephant. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, it just becomes so normal. It becomes a part of your life. You totally forget it's even there. And that's what the breath is. And so we need to start connecting with the breath again, because what we don't notice at the end of the day, that's where some major issues can come into effect. And we start to shallow breathe. We don't take full breaths. We're not present with the breath, and we're not understanding what the breath is doing. Even those exhales, think about the exhale for relaxation. If you take a deep inhale and it's a nice slow, let's say 4 count inhale, and then you exhale for 4 count, you can start to feel that parasympathetic system also take over. The muscles start to relax. So if you feel that, usually people are like, yeah, my arms felt so relaxed. I could feel my toes. Well, what about your pelvic floor? Can you start to relax your pelvic floor? Can you start to relax your anal muscles? Can you start to relax all muscles down below?
And unfortunately, a lot of us are so disconnected from those muscles down there for a variety of reasons. And that's one of the things that I think is so beautiful about what I do with pelvic steaming is, for a lot of my clients, it's the first time that they are like, oh, I have muscles down there. I feel like I can actually connect with them, which helps with weight training. It helps with sexual performance. It helps with so many things. But we just really become disconnected for a lot of social reasons and physiological reasons, and I could go on, from this part of our body. Pap smears are intrusive. People hold different kinds of pelvic traumas, and I'll let everybody just kind of fill in the blanks there. And we just turn off from this part of our body, or we've been made to feel shame around our assigned at birth gender or gender performance. It doesn't matter. And we turn off. And so because we intellectually disconnect, cerebrally disconnect ourselves from this part of our body, it's no wonder that we see so much dysfunction, disharmony in this particular part of our body. And then we wonder when our body can't show up for us, or we start having other symptoms when we try to do things that we think are seemingly healthy for ourselves, like starting to weight lift, and then here come the hemorrhoids, right? And because we disconnect, there's tension that's held here, and tension isn't supple, and the muscles can't expand and contract, just like you said. So thank you so much for coming on to talk about this really important topic. I think it is something that it's really important to raise awareness around, and women in particular, because for so many reasons, we tend to disconnect ourselves from this part of our body as a protective mechanism and many other things. That being able to start with the breath and use those beautiful instructions that you gave us to start to reconnect with this part of our body and how our pelvic floor and our core function. We can really take that knowledge and wisdom into so many other aspects of how we function in our day-to-day. And when we start integrating practices like starting to do weight-bearing activity, particularly in one of our past episodes, we were talking about like, how do you begin doing weight-bearing activity when you haven't done any? And you were talking about getting up from a chair without any other extra weight, just your body, and doing some light squats, right?
Yeah.
So like, even when you start at what seems like a very basic, simple place, not having a connection with your breath and how your pelvic floor muscles move, function, and feel makes that start hard.
Yeah.
So if you were to leave our audience with any final thoughts around pelvic floor and core, what would that be?
Well, I think you summed it up really well. And I've actually, as you were speaking, it's like a roadmap in my head, because the last episode we did was about how to get started, right? But I think this is the real starting point, especially if you are postpartum, like you've just had your child. The first place to start, even before you actually do exercise, is breath. Because remember, you might feel like, you know, you've torn some things, that things are broken, or things are not working like they should anymore, and you've got to get back to the gym and you've got to start weight training and it's not fast enough. But the truth is, you have this amazing ability. Right now, you're building your house back up and you're starting with the foundation. And that foundation is your breath, core, and pelvic floor. So start with your breath, then go on to working breath. Once you've done working breath, work on the bracing that we talked about, that Pillsbury Doughboy, and then work on your squats. And not even squats, just sitting up and standing off of a chair, getting back down again and standing back up again with all of those other elements together. And that is like the roadmap. Now we've done it all.
Yeah. The synergy of those things, it may sound very simple in articulating it. Well, I assure you, once you start doing it, you're going to be like, oh, I have muscles I didn't know I had. Oh, that's how that's supposed to feel. And being able to call your attention and your awareness to how those things feel enhances your performance in every other aspect of your life, up to and including your ability to have an orgasm and sexual performance.
Yes.
Because if you're too tight, you can't.
That's right.
If you're too loose, you can't. And so like being able to reclaim ownership and control and understanding of how these muscles work really puts you in the driver's seat to fully embrace your life in all of the ways that you want.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're building yourself back up better, stronger, and with baby, right? So
absolutely. So if people were to reach out to you, Alicia, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, if they want more information about resistance training, I've got that free masterclass, the 3-phase food and fitness formula. Every woman over 50 needs to know. If you're not in your 50s, you can still check it out, because as you've learned today, there's a lot to learn as we age and what to do. You can check out aliciajoneshealthyliving.com. That's my Facebook group. And I'll give you my YouTube, which I love YouTube. That's my thing. YouTube and Facebook, as well as Instagram.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today. You are a wealth of information. I always love talking with you, my friend.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right. Until next time, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at MoonEssenceMe on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.